Very close enough.
Dolores, all yours.
Okay, we had gone from the very general last night about immigration and the women, but this is a very specific to Indianapolis German-American woman. And this is an example of the letter that were in the old scripts. You can see it took quite a while to decipher through all of these handwriting. Through the efforts of Professor Antonius Holtman and Oldenburg, I was able to obtain copies of a collection of letters from Katharina Schuette Pfeil from Indianapolis to her mother and family in Lindern, Germany. A second I'm sorry, can you hear? And I don't know how to do louder. Okay, a second cache of her letters was found in the possession of another relative in Michigan. The letters spanned a period from 1861 to 1893. From these letters and other historical sources, I'm trying to build a fuller portrait of some of the contributions of early German immigrants to the development of Indianapolis. We know more of the accomplishments of the Verein Deutscher, those belonging to the many societies in Indianapolis, because he left more of a record. Families such as the Vonneguts, Liebers, and Schmidt, who were the movers and shakers of the community, are better documented. In the 1890s, Germans composed about an eighth of the population of Indianapolis, yet they owned about a fourth of the businesses. They also erected such edifices as the Propylaeum and the Athenaeum that stand as monuments to their success. However, there has been little research done in the larger, perhaps more ordinary group of immigrant citizens. This is in part due to the fact that materials about their lives are seldom discovered. The letters of Katharina are a unique opportunity to explore this immigrant segment. Katharina belonged to the Catholic German community in Indianapolis. But more about her story and the mysteries yet to be solved. This is a map of the town of Lindern in 1860. Katharina Schuette was born on the 17th of February in 1836 in Lindern in the Duchy of Oldenburg, Germany. Lindern is a smaller pocket of Catholic communities, about 27%, and a larger Protestant area, 72% in 1858, of northern Germany. In 1855, Lindern had a population of about 2,000 people. Oh. Is it because I have it?
I don't know.
All of a sudden it's not working. Sorry. We'll just switch it out.
Yeah, but I don't.
I don't know why. Oh, did I just do it or did you did it?
I did, but.
Oh,
That's
okay.
not going. Okay, then.
What do I do?
This is just on off. You can put forward and back.
Oh, you have to push it
Or,
out. Ooh.
or you just click forward, or you can.
Oh, this is. Okay.
So you can spot off.
I tried to toggle, but what am I?
Stick here. Or you can go forward and back.
If I hit it, not something. Oh. Backwards, okay. Sorry. Okay, this is a farmhouse in Lindern. As you can see, it's starting from what? Oh. Okay, this is a map of Lindern in 1860. And oops. All right. And this is the possible home of Goodknecht and Lindern at a later date. Katharina married Wilhelm Gutkenesch from Lüningen, a neighboring town, on the 14th of January, 1858, at the age of 21. Her husband was 10 years older than she. They lived in a home which they owned in Lüningen. Lüningen had a population of about 5,000 in 1858. This is a map of Germany roughly at that time, and the arrow shows where the Duchy of Oldenburg was. And this is a map then of that area with the two, you can see the two places, Linden and Loin. What was life like in this area of Germany? This is a relatively poor agricultural area. Many people were day workers without land. As many of you already know, instead of splitting up the land, only the eldest son would inherit. This left the other sons to work for their brothers or other farms. And here's a photo of a typical North German farm from Oldenburg. Some traveled to Holland, very close by, to seek employment. Some employment was just seasonal work. Others left to seek better opportunities in America. Between 1843 and 50, some 875 people, or 13% of the population, left Lüningen for America. From 1860 to 68, 17% left. About 75% of the people who left Oldenburg went to the States. We have here a photo of Katharina Schuette's family, the mother, the brother, and three sisters. There are still more, but this is an early photo. However, Katharina's family were among the more fortunate, even though she was one of 11 children, 8 of whom survived to adulthood. Katharina's grandfather and later her father and brother were wholesalers of knitted products, mostly socks that were sold in Holland. They organized the inhabitants of Linden and the region to make these knitted goods from the wool to the sheep that was raised there. This is a photo of the current family residence built around 1900, so after Katharina had left the residence. But this shows the relative wealth of the place. It's quite a large place. Why then did Katharina and her husband leave Lüningen for America? It certainly was not typical with someone with a home and a business would leave. One of the family legends was that Wilhelm helped a man over the Holland border to escape military conscription. The man was captured and told them of Wilhelm's assistance. At this point, Wilhelm left, presumably to avoid arrest. This is not at all certain, but evidence from a letter a little later alludes to some problem. In fact, Wilhelm left for America in April, leaving Katharina to arrange for the sale of their home. Katharina followed in September of the same year, either 1859 or 1860. I have not been able to locate ship records for either of them. I think I've got some clues now that might help. Nor have I discovered any arrest warrants as yet. So we went through all the local regional papers looking for an arrest warrant to show that that would be why he left, but we couldn't find anything at the time. So where are they coming to? Here's a photo of Indianapolis in 1862. There's about 25,000 to 30,000 people. So you can imagine it's quite a difference from their origin. How did they happen to come to Indianapolis? The first letter that we have from Katharina is from Indianapolis in 1861. From this letter, we know that they first came to Cincinnati, where many Oldenburgers already resided. Her mother asked why they moved to Indianapolis, where so few from their area lived. She explained that they could live just as well here, and that one heard much about the robberies and theft in Cincinnati. They lived near the railroad depot and operated a bakery at which Katharina helped Wilhelm all day, as she says. They also owned a cow and an old pig and 4 piglets. And most of these were kept behind the houses where they lived. Katharina often described the details of her economic situation to her mother. She stated that one can live here as cheaply as in Germany. She did not encourage others to immigrate, but stated that they should make up their own minds. In her words, the trip was difficult, especially for women, and we heard that last night. Katharina did say in this letter that they would return to Germany at some point in time and take possession again of their home there. Katharina's brief description of Civil War events is interesting. She mentioned that Wilhelm, her husband, would not have to fight because there were enough volunteers. Each time a group of volunteers arrived for training, there would be music and a parade and a firing of 14 cannons that shook the windows. We have here a photo of Indianapolis in 1870, and it shows the circle and the angled streets. There we go. This is a photo of a Sanborn map in 1887. The bakery was located at where the arrow shows at 134 South Illinois, according to the city directories of 1861 and 62. While times were difficult for farmers because of the war, Katharina claimed that business for bakeries and butchers were good because of the need to feed the troops. What was the religious community like for German Catholics in Indianapolis at that time? By the time Katharina and Wilhelm arrived in Indianapolis, there was already a Catholic church specifically for Germans, St. Mary's, founded in 1857-58, led by Pastor Zekras. The first Catholic church in Indianapolis, a chapel called Holy Cross Church, was built in 1840. This chapel was the forerunner of St. John's Church that was erected in 1850. Some Germans did attend services at St. John's, but the congregation was primarily Irish. The current St. John's was built in 1871. A joint cemetery, Holy Cross, was purchased south of town in 1862, 5 acres of which were reserved for the German congregation. I just go president. This is a photo of Sacred Heart, which many of you probably know. Sacred Heart, a second German Catholic church, was constructed in 1875, led by Franciscan friars from Indianapolis, Illinois, with a congregation of about 60 families. Many Indianapolis Southside families were happy that the children would no longer have to cross the railroad tracks to get to church. And she and her husband were founding members of this church. Katharina remained strong in her religious faith throughout her life, and she had the advantage of a German language religious community to support her. She was not a leader in the church women's group, but records of dues paid show her regularity of attendance. If she missed payments, she made up for them later. The family also paid pew fees to guarantee a presence in the church and support the pastor. They did not claim the most costly pews, but were faithful in their payments. Religious statements dominate many of Katharina's letters. It did not take long for tragedy to hit Katharina's life. In July 1862, Wilhelm Gutknecht succumbed to malaria. Wilhelm had suffered with malaria from the time they arrived here. Malaria was very prevalent in Indianapolis because a lot of that was swampland. But it was also a malady in northern Germany with its many peat bogs. A lengthy letter described his last few days. During one of his bouts, Katharina described how Wilhelm thought he was in Germany again and the dragoons were after him. He tried to get up and flee and had to be restrained. She also described how the priest, Zekras, administered to him and cried since he loved him as a brother. Very telling about her character was the declaration on the 5th of July, 1862 letter. If I had not stood by his side so well, he would have died much earlier. Whatever he wanted, he had, and he didn't have to work that hard because I took up many burdens from him. He also knew that was true. He often said I would be a very unlucky man without him. But it's worse for me. I am now in a totally abandoned in a foreign land. Later that same month, on the 26th of July, Katharina wrote about continuing the baking business and the hiring of help. She went into detail about money affairs, cost, and income. She promised that she would take care of herself and treat others fairly as well. Mention was made of some items that could be sent through an intermediary from Cincinnati. The family was obviously leery about her continuing alone in Indianapolis, and in a letter from the 8th of October, 1862, Katharina assured her brother Gerhard that he should have faith in her ability to handle her affairs, and that she would consult with a priest when necessary. The family must have also written to Pastor Segrist because he also sent a letter to her mother in October of that year. So normally, as Mariana showed yesterday, the males would have been head of the family. So this was a chance for her real independence. Katharina had to give up the bakery later in 1862 because the owner of the building was going to sell the place within a few months. She planned to open up a colonial shop or dried goods store instead, since she felt she knew English fairly well and could get along with customers. So very entrepreneurial. In fact, she finally stated that she liked it better here and would not be returning to Germany to live. She told her parents to sell her home in Germany. She obviously was fairly self-confident and was not without some means. She also spoke of not leaving the place where her husband and child were buried. The mention of a child is a mystery yet to be solved, since she did not mention it in other letters, and there's no record of a child being born to the Gutknecht in Germany or Indianapolis. Nor is a death reported in Indianapolis. I am currently having records in Cincinnati checked. Well, I still haven't, because the records are not all that open. So I still haven't been able to find out whether there was during that short period in Cincinnati a child. Okay, this is a photo of Katharina and John Pfeil. A dramatic turn in her life was described in her next letter on the 8th of June, 1863. She married John Pfeil on April 6, 1863. Pfeil was a German from southern Germany who had come to Indianapolis in 1853. He was a member of St. Mary's Church and later a founding member of Sacred Heart Church. She described him as a very orderly man, thrifty and industrious, who was a wagon maker by profession. Also telling was a statement to the effect that he was a kind man and that, in her words, I can do what I will. Yeah. Pfeil also was the same age as Katharina, 27. Apparently, Katharina had had many suitors for which she did not care. There were not many Northern German Catholics in the area, and she certainly would not marry a non-Catholic. At this point, the city directory showed John Pfeil as living at 50 Bluff Road. Katharina stated that John had bought the house, which they rented. His business was in the front of the house. The Indianapolis City Directory showed John Pfeil's occupation switching frequently between wagon maker and grocer. The Pfeil seemed to be very entrepreneurial, and from Katharina's constant description of finances, it seemed that she had a great deal to do with the financial aspects. In fact, in one letter, she stated that John had bought a house And then she crossed out John and wrote in, I bought a new house. Probably indicating that it was her funds. This switching from one occupation to another must have perceived as strange by the German relatives. Oh, now what did they do? Oh. Oh. I got the whole thing, so. I'm gonna do. Yeah, okay. So you can see by this view of Indianapolis, the many carriages that's there, so there would be a lot of business for carriage makers. Okay. Okay. From 1863 to 64, Pfeil is listed as a grocer with residence and business at the same address, 50 Bluff Road. From 1865 to 73 is listed as a wagon maker at 133 Bluff Road. And then at 432 South Meridian with a residence at 396 South Illinois. However, in 1872, John Pfeil suffered a stroke that made it hard for him to continue in the business of wagon making. From 1874 to 1884, his occupation was listed as grocer, but he was again listed as wagon maker from 1886 to 89. I have no idea. Okay. Okay. This is John Pfeil later in life. Katharina wrote in February 1876 that John had sold the wagon business for $450. John and Katharina's family grew rapidly. The first child, Laura, oh, come on. Why can't I do this? The first child, Dolores, was born in 1864 when Katharina was 28 years old. The second child, Maria, was born in 1867. The third child, Katharina, was born in 1871. The fourth child, Alphonse, the only son, was born in 1873. Is that more than? The fifth child, Anna Rose, was born in 1875. The sixth child, Francesca Cecilia, was born in 1878. Is that more? The seventh child, Ida Victoria, was born in 1882 when Katharina was 46 years old. There were also two children who died in infancy, John Jr. and Charles. With the birth of Ida, Katharina wrote that she would rather have died than had yet another child, but God had other plans. Oh. Almost had it. Okay. This is a photo of Illinois Street at 396 with a business and residence. And you see the little arrow, red arrow pointing to it. And then,
That's Radio Street.
okay, well, this is the 398 residence. With the, I think, no, it went to Hadley Street. Sorry, I missed the one in Hadley. With the growth of the family, the Pfeils built a new house at 398 South Illinois. Unfortunately, no deeds could be found in the file name in the court recorder's office. They moved into the new house on November 15, 1878. That same day, 2 hours before the move, Francesca Cecilia was born. Katharina stated that the neighbors could not believe that she had another child since she was in the store working every day. The new house, she states, cost $45,000, which can't be true. But Katharina tends to exaggerate a little when she does these things. So I think she was trying to impress the family. It would be more likely 4,500. I mean, 45,000 in those days would have been, yeah. But it was 2 stories in height with 8 rooms and 2 floors on the main floor. They could rent out one of the stores. She was also happy to relate that they would have a bathtub. This would help with summer heat and both gas and water in the house. Here we have the Hadley Street residence from the Sanborn maps. The Sanborn mark, they're later dates, but very similar. And here we have the one from 1887 and the arrow where they are. And then here's the same thing in 1898, which shows the growth in the number of stores that are there, or number of dwellings. In 1881, the Pfeils again built a new house. This time it was on the then outskirts of Indianapolis at 127 Hadley Avenue. Hadley Avenue was later renamed Kentucky Avenue, and their address became 1203 Kentucky Avenue. And here we have a picture of George Gillian on Kentucky Avenue. And that is a son-in-law. Okay, this is again, and this we're presuming is the house with little shops alongside it. I'm not, and this is after the flood of 1913, so it's looking a little shabby. According to the letters, the reason for moving was the poor business location on South Illinois. The new location was on the city's edge, where the railroad went by, and there were more factories and a slaughterhouse where 1,000 workers were employed. There were many families there, and they hoped business would be good. Through the years, they rent out several places that have not been able to identify, but the various Sanborn insurance maps show buildings that were added next to the residence, and they probably were just these little hovels that they rented out. It could be that they were built by the Pfeils. This still has to be established. At any rate, Katharina related the various money received for rentals or for when the place is filled empty. Money matters were a constant theme in Katharina's letter. One persistent reference to Katharina's letters related to the portion due her from the selling of her former home in Germany. Apparently, her parents had bought the home at what Katharina described as under market value to allow her to leave for America to be with her husband. When it was determined that she would not return, the home was finally sold. Since it sold for an amount above her selling price to the parents, Katharina expected a large amount as her share, even though the relatives in Germany had to care for the maintenance taxes on the state over the many years. Katharina also made it known that she was very concerned that she received her portion of the inheritance from her parents. She was the oldest child. She complained that her brother had not treated her fairly in this respect. The brother was the only son in the family and ran the financial affairs. The relatives in Germany must have been quite tired of hearing about this theme. The last letter that we have from Katharina in 1893 complained to her brother that she had expected something from her mother's estate. Okay, this is Katharina, a photo later in her life. The children of Katharina all married, but only Laura, the oldest, was married to a German, Karl Ross, in 1887 at 23 years of age. Laura met Karl Ross in Illinois while she was staying with a priest who was a friend of the family. Katharina was not happy that Ross did not own property, but she explained that he did have his own business as a tinner and that his father was worth at least $60,000, and there were only 4 children to inherit. He also was a Catholic, which was very important. Katharina must have convinced them to move to Indianapolis because Carl Rotz is listed in the city directory starting with 1892. They lived with the Pfeils for 2 years until 1894. The first grandchild was born in 1889. The Rotzes remain staunch members of Sacred Heart Church, and the family is still listed there. It's interesting to note that the other children all married after the death of Katharina in 1897 from cancer. John Pfeil did not die until 1912. The female children married rather late in age for this time period, from ages of 30 to 45. Only the youngest, Ida, married at 22 years of age, but her mother was already deceased by then. One wonders if Katharina's strong personality had anything to do with the fact the children were not listed as being married at Sacred Heart, but that might be expected since the spouses were Catholic, but not of German descent. So one married an Irishman, and the Pfeil family truly blended into the Indianapolis landscape. And this is the Pfeil cemetery lot at St. Joseph Cemetery. There are many more interesting aspects related to the letters of Katharina Schuette Pfeil that time will not permit to relate. And there are a number of mysteries in her family's life yet to solve. Hopefully one can gather from this brief review an idea of one enterprising immigrant's life in Indianapolis. This is only one story among the many of the people who, striving for a better life, helped build the city of Indianapolis and its entrepreneurial spirit.
How old was she when she came over to Houston?
Well, because we don't have the exact date, but I think, what did we say? She was, it was a year after she married, I think, or several years. I have to go back and see now. Yeah, she was 21, so she was about 22, 23.
And then she was like 27 when her first husband died.
Well, there was a year or two in between, but then when, yeah.
So she's 6 and she was committed to keeping that bakery.
Yeah. And, you know, hiring a staff to help her and do that. And that's the one thing she said she liked about America, that you could just do things, you know, where you would have to have an apprenticeship and everything. In Germany, you want to be a baker, you're a baker, you know, as long as somebody bought your stuff, you're a baker. So it was just really interesting, yeah.
Did you ever see how much money she did from the sale of that house?
No, she didn't know the amounts weren't given. But, and she kept saying you could live here as well as in Germany, send money. I mean, it was just, it's a consistent thing. And even at the one point, she asked her for a present for her daughter, something preferably gold. You know, it just, it's very, her mind was always on money. Yeah.
So these letters, some of them you saw came back from Germany, back in America.
No, they didn't come here. They're still in Germany with the great granddaughter of the brother, of her brother. The ones in Michigan, I have no idea how they got there. And then there were some additional photos from people in Toronto that were relatives. And the great granddaughter of Katharina contacted Giles and saw something about the letters in one of the publications. And so she had some of the family history. And then we visited the other great granddaughter in Linden, and we got some other genealogical stuff she had done. And it's been a interesting search.
What on the path to the research all of this?
I'm sorry.
What put you on the path to the research all of this? With the letters?
Compelled.
Yeah.
She had a star.
But,
Why were you interested in all that?
well, it just was a really interesting project, and we don't have, you know, that type of letters, as I say, from that echelon of society very often. Oh, the professor Antonius Holtman was collecting, he works with German American Studies in Oldenburg. And he was asked for letters there that people might have from the States. And these letters then were offered for him to look at and make copies. And so we went and made better copies because, as you can tell, the ink is fading. It's very hard to read. So we had to do them from the old German script to modern German script and then the English, and the best we could. But they're from a Plattdeutsch area, so sometimes you get other words in there, and then it's like many letters, when they start writing from here, they mix English, so you can spend a long time trying to figure out the word only to find out it's flower or something, instead of a German word. But it's been an interesting adventure, and I know more about her family history than mine right now, but just. But any questions? Okay.
Okay.